All right, thanks, guys. Time's now 6:44. We are starting to see some rain across the area. Let's get over to meteorologist Hannah Gard with an update on what is happening now. We're starting to see those, well, we see in Grand Isle, they're already starting to see impacts. What about farther inland?
Yeah, we're seeing a couple of little pop-up showers that are trying to move inland over here in the coastal areas to the east. We've had some light rainfall lingering around, but we're starting to get this outer band of heavier rain coming into parts of our area. So we'll take a little zoom around. We're seeing some pockets of moderate rainfall near Slidell, Stennis, over the Twin Span. This is mostly on the lighter side, but we're starting to see these heavier bands that are kind of lingering offshore. As those push inland, we'll see some heavy rainfall. And then south of the metro, this is where we're seeing persistent light rain with little pockets of moderate to heavy rainfall east of Raceland, west of Lafitte right now. But then down along the coast, Cocodrie, you're starting to get into this moderate to heavy rain that's not going to let up because the northern side of this storm is where most of the rain is. So as soon as that starts, when you get into these heavier bands of rainfall, you're not really going to see a break from that. The winds are starting to pick up too offshore. We're seeing around 25-mile-per-hour sustained winds, but I'm not seeing gusts yet. Typically on this map, we'll see some gusts popping up as we get those. We'll continue to watch for that. But you can see this is well offshore. The rain is all on the northern and northeastern side. So this is what we're starting to see come in. You have this band of some heavier rainfall that's displaced to the northeast of the eye, which is down here. So that's going to last for a while because of the trajectory of the storm as it's coming up to the northeast. When you get that heavier rain, we're going to be stuck in this batch of rainfall for quite a while. And then wherever the eye sits on the northern side of that, that's going to be a swath of really heavy rain. So we do have a flood watch in effect. This is for that heavy flooding rainfall throughout today and into tomorrow morning. It extends well inland as well and for our entire area. So here's the swath of rain on our Fox 8 modeling, and look at the scale. This is going to be over 15 inches where you see these white areas or very light purples. That's where that eye wall is going to be located. So this could change the actual trajectory of that swath of heavy rain because there's still some uncertainty on exactly the track that the eye will take. But somebody along this swath of heavy rain is going to see some major flood potential. This is going to be flash flooding very quickly as that heaviest rain part of the system comes through. But even expanding outside of that, you see the purples are pretty wide, couple mile swath of over 10 inches of rain. And then a lot of the area is going to see at least 6 inches of rain. We could see isolated areas higher than that expanding outside of the eye as well, especially because we're already starting to see some of that heavier rain coming through. Now, the other thing we have to watch for as we're starting to get the outer bands of Francine is severe weather. We're in a level 2 out of 5 risk for severe storms. This is for those tornadoes that we can see spin up. As those bands come on land, they encounter the friction from the ground, and that can spin up those tornadoes. So we'll be watching that as we go throughout this morning. As soon as those bands start coming inland, that's when that will become a threat. So let's take a zoomed in look at each of our areas. The coastal areas, especially where we see that eye wall coming inland, that's where we're going to see the highest winds. We could see even over 100-mile-per-hour winds in that eye, but a lot of the coastal areas down to the southwest are going to see over 90-mile-per-hour winds, 6 to 10 inches of rain at least, but I think we could see higher than that, especially wherever that eye comes in. And then the storm surge, we're talking 5 to 10 feet, and whichever side lands on the eastern side of that eye wall is where we're really going to have those surge problems of up to 10 feet of surge. In the metro, we're expecting those hurricane winds potentially to translate farther inland, so 60 to 80-mile-per-hour winds possible starting this afternoon. And then we could see over 8 inches of rain. We know that's going to cause problems with street flooding out there. We could see very quick flash flooding as those heavy bands of rain come in. We're also watching for that tornado risk. Again, that really starts over the next couple of hours now that we're starting to see those outer bands of Francine coming through. River parishes, we have those winds slightly higher because, again, you'll probably be located closer to that eye wall. 70 to 90-mile-per-hour winds. You could see those hurricane winds translating farther inland, over 8 inches of rain. And again, the bullseye is going to be wherever that eye wall is, where we have the heaviest rainfall. It's going to dump really high rain rates. Along with that tornado risk, we also have to watch for that over to the west. North Shore, mainly watching for the tornado risk, but there's going to be a swath of the over 6 inches of rain, again, depending on where the eye actually comes in. And then it will pretty quickly taper off farther up to the north. So northern areas, you'll be on the lower side of that wind scale, 45 to 65 miles per hour. And then wherever you get closer to the eye, that's when you're going to see those higher winds. Gulf Coast, you're a little bit below on the wind range because, again, this is going to be farther to the east of where we see those main winds, and it will have time to weaken as it comes inland. But 35 to 65 mile per hour winds still. You could see tropical storm force winds, 6 to 8 inches of rain going to cause some flash flooding problems, and then we have 3 to 5 feet of storm surge in those areas. So with those winds, I'm expecting to see power outages starting over the next couple of hours as we start to see those winds coming through in the coastal areas, especially by late morning. And then as they translate inland, we're going to see more widespread power outages across the south shore, and then that will start to transfer to the north shore. But you can see they're a little bit less likely to happen up to the north and in southern Mississippi because we will see some rapid weakening of the system the farther inland it gets. But power outages is certainly going to be an issue as we go throughout today. Now, looking at the wind field right now, it was a little bit lopsided there on the center, and we could see those winds coming in first. Again, you're seeing the rain on the northern side, and that's going to position most of the bad weather on the northern end too. So as it approaches, we could see that kind of concentrated on the northeastern side of the storm, but we could see that change as it continues to try to wrap up because we're still expecting intensification into a Category 2 hurricane prior to landfall. But that means that the surge problems will start earlier if we see that on the northeastern side where the highest winds are concentrated. So Cocodrie, zooming in here on the storm and tide times, 5 to 10 feet of storm surge. High tide was at 4:42 this morning. So a lot of these areas, high tide is timing out well for us because the winds are going to be coming in the early afternoon and into the evening. That's around low tide, so that's good. We don't want to exacerbate the storm surge problems. Grand Isle, 4 to 7 feet, and then we have 327 on that high tide. So we're going to be really at low tide as the system comes in. Breton Island, we're saying 2 to 4 feet, but there's going to be localized areas depending on the positioning of the eye where you're going to have some higher storm surge problems depending on the wind direction there. The high tide for you, 413. So already happened. That means we're going into low tide. That's good news. On the southern Mississippi coastline, same thing, 4:10 in the morning. So we're going to be going into low tide, but 4 to 6 feet of storm surge. That's an increase from what we were projecting yesterday because we've seen that more easterly shift. So we want to continue to watch those areas. Shell Beach, 3 to 5 feet. Your high tide was 7:35 this morning, so still a ways to go. And then we'll be going down throughout the rest of the day. Same with the Wrigley's and Slidell, 4 to 6 feet of storm surge there though. And then Lake Pontchartrain, this is where we got to watch for. And a lot of these northern areas along the lake, your high tide is going to be in the afternoon, the early afternoon, as those winds start to pick up. But if we see the timing of this getting farther north, more toward the early evening, that will be helpful for us because it's going to be going down. So we want this to be later that we start to see the winds really picking up as they go across the lake, because 4 to 6 feet of storm surge with an exacerbated wind is going to be a problem as we're around high tide. But I do think it'll be going down as we see the storm coming in. So here's a look at Francine. Right now we have a Category 1 hurricane. We're starting to see those gusts offshore. You can see that buoy just picked up a 74 mile per hour wind gust. It's continuing to strengthen. It is very lopsided, guys, though, so that's why we've already been seeing some of that rain coming into our area. And as those outer bands are located really far to the northeast of the system, that tornado threat is going to increase quickly as we go throughout the next couple of hours. And we could see some really heavy rain before the eye wall even comes into play.
And that's an excellent point because we tend to look, and we kind of all do it, the layman among us, is look and focus on that cone. You say, oh, I'm outside the cone, I'm good. But with tornadoes, especially, correct me if I'm wrong, many of them will set up in the northeast quadrant and outside the cone.
Yes. Yeah, typically those are outside the cone because, you know, the eye wall, that's what the edge of the cone is. It's the eye of the storm. So you're not really seeing that tornado threat concentrated to the center. It's those outer bands that are interacting with land as they come on shore. So especially with this, it's so far removed from the center of these outer bands and up to the northeast. We really want to closely watch that throughout the next couple of hours.
So we've been warning people or reminding people to make sure their devices are charged. And if you don't have your alerts on, I know sometimes people turn them off because they get annoyed. But turn those back on, especially right now, because if those storm warnings or the tornado warnings or watches pop up, you need to know what's happening right where you are and take cover if you need to.
Yeah, and typically, you want to shelter in place as the worst of the storm is coming through, but you also might need to do that prior when we're getting these outer bands of rainfall when you might not think about it.
That was a pretty good look, especially with the tides there. But let's talk about a couple of areas that we haven't mentioned this morning. Tangipahoa Parish, obviously the Tangipahoa River is an issue there. If you get the winds that people experienced that during Hurricane Ida, what's your outlook? And obviously path is critical to how much surge piles up into their coastline and then backing up into rivers.
Yeah, that's really what we need to watch for is the positioning of the eye as it comes inland. A couple of our models have it farther to the east going over the metro. Some of them have it positioned a little bit farther to the west. So those areas where the winds are pushing onshore are obviously going to be those problem spots. So as we go throughout the next couple of hours, as it gets closer, we'll have a better idea of exactly where that's going to come inland, and that will help us out on where the impacts will likely be the greatest.
And obviously the most serious impacts aren't necessarily in places that are farther inland, say Washington Parish, Bogalusa, Franklinton, those areas, even in Mississippi, Poplarville, but people just do need to be aware that there is a significant rain and wind threat for many hours from now.
Yeah, even when we show that rainfall map, you're seeing the purples popping along the eye, but that's over 15 inches of rain where those bullseyes are. So even farther out from that, you're still seeing 6 to 8 inches of rainfall, which we know on a daily basis would cause flooding issues in many areas. So we're watching for that. The grounds are saturated too. We've been getting a lot of rain over the past couple of weeks, so we could see some significant flash flooding problems. And then the North Shore, southern Mississippi, especially with the tornado threat, I do think that that's going to be substantial, and that'll start earlier than actually the storm winds.
Even heard some parish officials concerned about trees being secure with the grounds being so saturated, more rain coming in plus wind. So that's something else to think about. But again, just be sure you have your alerts on so you can know if you need to be sheltering in place or getting to an even safer space in your house because of something coming through the area. We should be getting another update in a few moments, correct? On this.
Yes, we should at 7 o'clock, so about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We'll check back in with you in just a few moments then.
All right, in the meantime, the river parishes are preparing for the possibility of strong winds, flooding, and surge, and Chris Welty has that.
The clock is running out on time to prepare for Francine's impact.